She stood at her husband's grave in the rain, holding an umbrella she hadn't opened, and her phone rang. It was her mother. She let it go to voicemail. She always did. And when people ask why, when friends lower their voices at dinner parties and tilt their heads with that particular brand of careful sympathy, she gives them the short version. We just drifted apart. But that's not the truth. The truth is something she carried alone for 11 years while she built a life, fell in love, buried that love, and somehow kept standing. My name is Vera, not that Vera. And this is the story of why I haven't spoken to my parents in over a decade, and why the day I finally stopped answering their calls was the same day I truly began to understand what it means to survive someone. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Have you ever protected someone who never asked to be protected? Someone who didn't even know you were doing it? Because that's exactly what this story is about. A woman who spent years shielding people who didn't deserve her silence. And one man who saw through every wall she built before she could stop him. If you've ever cut someone out of your life, a parent, a sibling, someone who was supposed to love you, and wondered whether you made the right call, stay with me. Because what happened to this woman is going to make you think twice about everything you assume about family loyalty. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to choose between blood and your own sanity. Like this video if you believe people can choose their own families. And if you're new here, subscribe. We tell real stories, the kind people usually only whisper. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Her name was Maren. Not a common name. Her mother had picked it from a poem she'd read once in a dentist's office and never forgotten. That was the kind of woman Lorette was. She collected beautiful things and forgot where she'd found them. Names, promises, daughters. Maren grew up in Haverford, Pennsylvania, in a house with a wraparound porch and a mother who smiled for company and a father who drank quietly in rooms no one else was using. They were not a violent family, not in the way people mean when they use that word. There were no bruises, no screaming matches that rattled the windows. What there was, instead, was a particular and suffocating silence. Her father, Clifton, worked in insurance. He wore the same 4 ties on rotation and called everyone Buddy. The mailman, the neighbor's kid, Maren herself. He was not unkind. He was simply somewhere else, always, even when he was standing right in front of you. A man so thoroughly absent from his own life that you almost felt sorry for him. Lorette was different. Lorette was present, aggressively, selectively present. She had opinions about Maren's clothes, her posture, her laugh, too loud, her ambitions, too small, then later too large, depending on the year. She was the kind of mother who said, "I love you," like it was a transaction, like it came with terms and conditions she'd never fully disclosed. Maren had one brother, Sutton, 3 years older, their mother's favorite in the way that oldest sons often become favorites, unconsciously, completely, without apology. Sutton wasn't cruel. He was just gone by the time Maren was old enough to need him. Off to college, then a job in Seattle, then a life that didn't loop back very often. So Maren grew up essentially alone in a full house. She was good at school, good at being quiet, good at reading the temperature of a room the moment she walked in, a skill she'd developed young, the kind children develop when they learn early that the adults around them are unpredictable in small, grinding ways. She left for college at 17. Early admission to a school in upstate New York, far enough to breathe, close enough that her mother couldn't accuse her of abandoning the family. She studied literature and education. She made friends slowly and kept them carefully. She called home every Sunday because she'd been told to, and she listened to her mother's updates, the neighbor's renovation, the church bake sale, Sutton's promotion. And she said, and that's great. Mom, and watched the minutes tick by on her phone screen. She graduated. She got a job teaching middle school English in a small city in Vermont. She rented an apartment above a hardware store. She bought a second-hand couch and a coffee maker and a succulent she named Gerald, after no one in particular, And she was, for the first time in her life, genuinely, quietly happy. That was the life she'd made for herself. Then she met Brennan. He was a high school history teacher at the school across the street. They met at a faculty mixer that neither of them had wanted to attend. She'd come because her colleague guilted her into it. He'd come because he'd lost a bet with his department head. He was not immediately remarkable. Medium height, dark hair that was starting to go silver at the temples, even though he was only 31. He wore a flannel shirt to an event where most people had worn blazers and didn't seem to notice or care. He was standing near the snack table eating crackers with a focus that suggested he found them personally offensive. She walked over to get a drink, and he said, without looking up, "The brie is a lie. Tastes like sadness." She laughed, the loud laugh her mother had always hated. He looked up. That was that. They dated for 8 months before he told her he loved her, and he said it the way people say things they've been thinking about for a long time. Plainly, without decoration, like he was just stating a fact about the weather. She said it back, and meant it so completely it frightened her. What Brennan had, the thing she hadn't known she was missing, was consistency. He said what he meant. He showed up when he said he would. He remembered things she'd mentioned in passing 3 months earlier. He asked follow-up questions. He was, in the clearest and most essential sense, paying attention. For Maren, who had spent her entire childhood learning not to expect that, it was almost disorienting. She kept waiting for the shift, the withdrawal, the moment when the real version of him would emerge and be something smaller and colder than the one she'd been allowed to see. It never came. They got married on a Saturday in October at a small inn outside Burlington. 32 guests, string lights in the trees. Her friend Odessa made the cake. Sutton flew in from Seattle and gave a toast that made everyone cry. Her parents came and sat at the table closest to the exit and left before the dancing started. She noticed. She didn't say anything. Brennan noticed her noticing. That night when everyone was gone and they were sitting on the inn's back porch in their wedding clothes with their shoes off, he took her hand and said, "You okay?" "Yeah," she said. He waited. She said, "They didn't dance." He said, "I know." She said, "They never stayed for the good part." He held her hand tighter and didn't try to fix it. And that small, perfect act of not trying to fix it, was the moment she knew she had made the right choice. They bought a house. They adopted a dog, a ridiculous golden retriever they named Professor, who destroyed exactly one couch and showed no remorse. They built a life that was warm and ordinary and full of the kind of small daily joy that doesn't photograph well, but fills up a person in ways that matter. For 4 years, it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Brain tumor, glioblastoma, stage 4. Brennan was 36 years old. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Ashworth, who had clearly delivered this news before and had not, to her great credit, become numb to it, walked them through the options with careful, measured honesty. Surgery to reduce the mass, radiation, chemotherapy. There were cases, she said. She was careful to say cases, not miracles, where patients had significantly exceeded the projected timeline. The projected timeline was 14 months. They drove home in silence. Brennan made soup. He actually made soup. From scratch, dried beans, a ham hock he'd had in the freezer, cornbread from a box. He cooked when he was processing things. Maren sat at the kitchen island and watched him and didn't say a word, and Professor lay on her feet like he knew. "We're going to handle this," Brennan said, stirring. She said, "I know." She didn't know, but she believed him because she always believed him, and that belief was the only thing that got her through the next 18 months. She told her parents 2 weeks after the diagnosis. She drove down to Haverford on a Saturday, sat in the living room with the floral couches and the photograph of the church on the wall, and told them. Her father said, "That's terrible, buddy." Her mother was quiet for a moment and then said, "Does his family have good insurance?" Maren stared at her. Laurette continued, I'm just asking because you'll want to make sure the financial side is handled. These things can get very complicated. Your father's cousin had something similar and the bills were— Mom, Marin said. Lorette stopped. My husband is dying, Marin said, quietly, clearly, like she was pronouncing each word with intention. That's what I need you to understand right now. That's all. Lorette pressed her lips together. I understand that. I'm trying to be practical. Marin drove home. She didn't call for 3 weeks. When she finally did, because she'd been raised to call, her mother answered on the second ring and launched directly into a story about the neighbor's new fence without asking once how Brennan was doing. Marin set the phone on the counter and let her mother talk and stared at Professor, who was asleep in a patch of afternoon sun, and thought, this is who they are. This is who they have always been. This is not going to change. That thought, not angry, just clear, was the beginning of something. Brennan had good months and bad months. He kept teaching for as long as he could. His students made him cards. His colleagues covered his classes on the hard days without being asked. The community around them, real community, chosen and earned, showed up in ways that still made Marin catch her breath when she thought about it years later. Her parents visited once in the spring, 14 months after the diagnosis. They stayed 2 days. Her father watched television. Her mother rearranged Marin's kitchen cabinets without asking and made a comment about the dog hair on the furniture. Brennan, because he was Brennan, thanked them for coming and walked them to their car and shook her father's hand and hugged her mother, who accepted it stiffly. Your folks okay? He asked her afterward, sitting on the porch steps. They're who they are, she said. He put his arm around her. You've been taking care of yourself around them your whole life, haven't you? She was quiet. It's okay to stop, he said. You know that, right? She didn't answer, but she heard him. Brennan died on a Thursday morning in November, 19 months after the diagnosis. He had exceeded the timeline by 5 months, which the doctors noted and which meant something to Marin in the way that the specific, measurable proof of someone's stubbornness always means something to the people who loved them. He died at home, in their bed, with Professor on the floor beside him and Marin holding his hand. He had been unconscious for the last 2 days. The hospice nurse, a quiet woman named Theodora, who moved through the house like she'd always been part of it, had told Marin to keep talking to him even so. They can still hear you, she said, right up until the end. So Marin talked. She told him about the first time she'd seen him at that faculty mixer. She told him that the brie had honestly been pretty good. She told him about a student who'd handed in an essay about their dog and called it my best friend and roommate, and how she'd laughed so hard she'd had to step into the hallway. She told him that Professor had eaten a throw pillow that morning and seemed entirely at peace with the decision. She told him she would be okay. She told him she didn't know if that was true yet, but she was going to keep trying until it was. She told him she loved him. He died 20 minutes later. The funeral was small, just the way he would have wanted, not performative, not elaborate. His parents, Geraldine and Mac, flew in from Oregon and held Marin like she was their own child, which was the kindest thing anyone did in that entire terrible week. His friends came. Her friends came. Odessa held her hand through the whole service and didn't say a single useless thing, which Marin later told her was the greatest gift anyone had given her. Her parents came. Her mother wore a black dress that Marin recognized from a cousin's funeral 6 years earlier. Her father shook hands with people he didn't know and called them Buddy. At the reception afterward, her mother pulled her aside near the kitchen and said, "You're going to need to think about selling the house. A woman alone in a place this size is just asking for problems." Marin looked at her. She had not slept properly in 4 months. She had watched the man she loved dissolve, by degrees, from the person he was into someone smaller and quieter and further away. And she had held his hand through every single inch of that distance. And her mother was talking about the house. "I need you to not do that right now," Marin said. "I'm just being practical." "I know," Marin said. "You're always practical." She walked away. Her parents left that evening. Her mother sent a text the next morning. The service was nice. Let us know if you need anything. Maren read it. She put her phone down. She did not respond. What happened next was not dramatic. That's the thing about grief that no one prepares you for. How much of it is administrative? The death certificates, the accounts, the insurance claims, the pile of Brennan's things that you sort through in stages because you can only do a little at a time before your hands stop working properly. Maren threw herself into the logistics because logistics had rules. And rules were navigable, and navigating things was what she knew how to do. She went back to teaching in January. Her students were careful with her in the way that 12-year-olds can sometimes be, with a raw, unself-conscious tenderness that grown adults usually edit out of themselves. One boy named Theo left a granola bar on her desk every Monday for 2 months without explanation. She didn't ask. She ate everyone. She kept the house. She kept Professor. She started running, something she'd never done before, but Brennan had gone on long walks when he needed to think, and she needed something that moved the same way, that let the body do the work the mind couldn't. Her parents called every few weeks. She answered sometimes. The conversations were the same as they had always been. Her mother's updates, her father's silence, the occasional question about her well-being that felt more like a formality than a genuine inquiry. She was always vaguely tired afterward. Not hurt exactly, just depleted, the way you feel after spending time in a room with bad air. 6 months after Brennan's death, her mother called and, in the course of a long and wandering conversation, said, "I've been thinking, you really should start considering dating again. You're 34. These things have timelines, you know." Maren was sitting on the back porch, where she and Brennan used to sit. "Timelines," she repeated. "I just mean—" "Mom," Maren said, "Brennan has been gone for 6 months." "I know that. I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm saying he has been gone for 6 months," Maren said again, "and I don't think you've asked me once how I'm actually doing. Not in a real way. Not in a way where you actually wanted the answer." Silence. "That's not fair," her mother said. "I call every week. I know you do. Your father and I—" "I know, Mom." Maren's voice was flat now, not angry, flat in the way of something that has been worn smooth by time and contact. "I have to go." She hung up. She sat there for a long time, watching Professor wander the yard, and thought about what Brennan had said. "You've been taking care of yourself around them your whole life. It's okay to stop." She thought about all the Sundays she'd called because she'd been told to, all the visits she'd made because absence would have caused a conflict she didn't have the energy to navigate, all the years she'd maintained a performance of family that bore no relationship to what family had ever actually felt like. She thought about Geraldine and Mac, who had called her every week since Brennan died, not to ask her about dating timelines, but to tell her funny stories about him when he was young, to say they wanted her to know he was real and remembered, to tell her she was still their daughter if she wanted to be. She thought about Odessa, who drove 3 hours round trip to bring her soup on a Wednesday, just because she'd seemed quiet on the phone. She thought about Theodora, the hospice nurse, who had touched her shoulder as she left that last morning and said simply, "You gave him a beautiful death. Not everyone gets that." She thought about Theo and his Monday granola bars. She thought about all the people who had loved her, specifically, deliberately, with attention, and about how little of that she had ever received from the 2 people who were supposed to be its original source. And she thought, "I am 45 years old." She wasn't. She was 34, but grief ages your understanding of time in strange ways. "I am 34 years old and I am done pretending." She picked up her phone. She did not call her mother back. The silence lasted 3 weeks. Her mother broke it with a text. "You hung up on me." That was rude. Maren stared at it for a long time. Then she did something she had never done in 34 years of being Lorette's daughter. She wrote back honestly. Not a text, a letter. She spent 2 evenings writing it. She printed it, sealed it in an envelope, drove to the post office herself, and sent it with a return receipt so she would know when it arrived. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten, clear. She wrote about what it had felt like to grow up in a house where love was conditional and presence was performance. She wrote about calling home from college and feeling her chest decompress with relief the moment she hung up. She wrote about introducing Brennan to her parents and watching his face as he processed, over the course of one dinner, what kind of people they were, and how, driving home, he'd said gently, "I think you've done a remarkable job of building a life in spite of some real headwinds." She wrote about the diagnosis. She wrote about sitting in their living room and saying, "My husband is dying," and hearing her mother ask about insurance. She wrote about the funeral. She wrote about the house. She wrote, "I know you love me in the way that you know how to love. I have never doubted that you love me. What I have doubted, what I have come to understand clearly in the last 6 months of having very little patience left for things that aren't true, is that your love has never been accompanied by the attention I needed. You were present, but not paying attention. And I know the difference now, because I was married to a man who paid attention to everything, and I watched what that looks like, and I cannot unsee it." She wrote, "I am not writing this to punish you, or to score points, or to make you feel guilty. I am writing this because I need you to understand why I am going to stop performing the relationship we have been pretending to have. I need a rest from it. I need to stop spending energy I don't have on a dynamic that has never once left me feeling loved in the way that matters." She wrote, "I hope you'll understand. I don't expect you to." She signed it, Maren. The return receipt came back 8 days later. Her mother called that same afternoon. Maren watched the phone ring. She let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 4 minutes long. She listened to it once, in full. Her mother cried. Her mother said things that were not untrue. "We tried, we were there, we came when it mattered," and some things that were. "You always made everything so difficult." She said, "Your father is devastated." She said, "After everything we did for you." She said, "I don't know where we went wrong." Maren sat with the phone in her lap for a long time. Then she called Geraldine. "Hi, honey," Geraldine said on the first ring, in the voice of someone who had been hoping to hear from her. "Hi," Maren said. And then she cried, really cried for the first time since the funeral, and Geraldine stayed on the phone and let her and said, when it was over, "You know what Brennan used to say about you? He used to say you were the most honest person he'd ever met. He said it like it was his favorite thing." Maren wiped her face. "I sent my mother a letter," she said. "I know," Geraldine said. "He would have been proud of you." She didn't call her mother back. Not that day. Not the next week. Not the next month. Sutton called from Seattle in January, her brother awkward and uncertain, navigating a situation he'd managed to miss most of the context for. He said, "Mum is really hurt, Maren." "I know," she said. "She doesn't understand." "I explained it," Maren said, "in the letter." She says the letter was Sutton. She kept her voice gentle. He hadn't earned her anger. "I love you. But I need you to understand that I have spent 34 years making sure other people in this family were comfortable with a situation that was never comfortable for me. I'm not doing that anymore. I hope that makes sense." A long pause. "Does it need to be permanent?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "Right now it just needs to be long enough for me to stop being so tired." He was quiet. Then he said, "Okay, she said. They talked for another 20 minutes. About his kids, about Seattle, about a terrible movie they'd both accidentally seen. It was the best conversation they'd had in years. She thought, maybe this is where it starts. Not with the people who hurt me, with the ones who are still willing to actually show up. The first year without contact was the hardest. Not because she missed her parents. Not exactly. What she missed was the idea of parents, the version that existed only as a wish she'd been carrying since childhood. The ones who would have shown up when Brennan was diagnosed with something other than practical questions. The ones who would have danced at her wedding. What she actually mourned was the loss of the hope that they might still become those people. That grief was its own specific, strange thing. She worked through it, in therapy, with Odessa, on long runs with Professor trotting beside her in the early morning quiet. She was not, she knew, simply a victim of bad parents. She had made choices, She had maintained a silence that protected no one. She had stayed in a dynamic for decades because leaving it felt like an admission that the family she'd been born into had failed her, and that admission had seemed, for a very long time, too heavy to carry. It wasn't heavy, actually. It was lighter than everything she'd been carrying before. She redecorated the living room. Not because of grief. She wasn't erasing Brennan, she would never be doing that, but because she'd always secretly wanted darker bookshelves and more plants and a reading chair by the window, and Brennan had always teased her about the reading chair because it kept ending up in slightly different positions, depending on where the light fell, and she put it now exactly where she'd always wanted it, and cried about that a little, and laughed about it more. She had Geraldine and Mac for Christmas. It was the best Christmas she could remember. Sutton came down from Seattle with his wife Petra and their 2 kids the following Easter, and they sat on the back porch where Maren and Brennan used to sit, and her nephew threw a tennis ball for Professor with the absolute seriousness of a child who has been trusted with an important task. And Maren thought, this is what family looks like when it's working. Her mother sent a card on her birthday. Inside, in Lorette's careful handwriting, thinking of you. I hope you're well. I hope you know we love you. Maren put it on the mantel. She didn't call. She wasn't ready. She wasn't sure she would ever be ready in the way that would lead to the same old dynamic resuming. But she put the card on the mantel, and she looked at it sometimes, and she let it mean what it meant, a small, imperfect effort from a woman who loved her daughter in the only way she knew how, which was not enough, but was not nothing. 3 years after Brennan died, Maren took her class on a field trip to a local historical museum. She was walking through an exhibit on early Vermont settlers when she overheard one of her students, a quiet girl named Blythe, who read more than anyone Maren had ever taught, saying to her friend, "But if your family makes you sad all the time, is it okay to just not be around them?" Her friend shrugged. "I don't know. They're your family." "But what does that even mean?" Blythe said, not angry, genuinely puzzled, with the bright and unclouded certainty of a 12-year-old thinking through something seriously for the first time. Maren kept walking, but she thought about it the whole drive back. What does it mean? That they're your family? She had spent a long time believing it meant obligation, endurance, the maintenance of a connection regardless of what it cost, because the alternative, the acknowledgement that family could fail you just as completely as any stranger, was too destabilizing a truth to sit with. But here is what she believed now, 3 years out, standing in the changed house with the dark bookshelves and the reading chair in the right place. Family is the people who pay attention. Not perfectly, not always, not without failure and miscommunication and the ordinary damage that humans do to each other simply by existing in close proximity, but fundamentally at the baseline, the people who show up with intention, who ask how you are and wait for the answer, who notice when something is wrong before you name it, who let you have your grief without rushing it toward a resolution that would make them more comfortable. Brennan had been her family. Geraldine and Mac were her family. Odessa was her family. Theodora, the hospice nurse, who had touched her shoulder on the last morning, even she had been, in that particular and necessary moment, family. Her parents were something else, not enemies, not strangers. Something that didn't have a clean name yet, something that lived in the complicated drawer where you put the things you're still figuring out. She picked up her phone. She did not call her mother. She called Geraldine. "How are you, honey?" Geraldine said. "Good," Maren said. "Actually good." She took Professor for a run. The October light was coming through the trees the way it always did this time of year, in long, slanted gold lines that made everything look slightly more valuable than usual. And she thought about Brennan saying remarkable job in spite of real headwinds, and she ran and let the tears go where they needed to go, which was nowhere specific, just out. And when she got home, she sat in the reading chair and watched the light move across the room. She thought, I did not end a relationship. I ended a performance. She thought, there is a difference. She thought he knew that. He was always trying to tell me. She sat in the chair until it was dark, and Professor slept at her feet, and outside, the Vermont evening came in slow and quiet and entirely sufficient. She was okay. She had always been, in some foundational sense, okay. She had just needed enough space and silence and chosen love around her to finally believe it. If you've made it this far, thank you, really, because this story isn't easy to sit with. It's not a villain story. Lorette and Clifton are not monsters. They're something harder to reckon with. They're just people who had their daughter's love and didn't quite know what to do with it. And Maren isn't a hero exactly. She's just someone who got tired. Who had a man love her well enough that it changed her understanding of what love is supposed to feel like, and who, when he was gone, found she couldn't unknow what she now knew. Here's the thing I want you to take with you. Choosing distance from someone who hurt you, even a parent, even someone who never meant to, is not the same as cruelty. It is not a punishment. It can be, when it comes from the right place, an act of profound and necessary self-respect. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to earn love from people who only know how to give it on their own terms, and go find the people who give it freely. Maren found those people. They were there the whole time. They are out there for you too. Leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between maintaining a relationship and maintaining yourself? I want to hear where you are, how you're doing, and what this story stirred up for you. Like this video if it meant something. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. I'll be back next week with another. Take care of yourselves.